Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Marie, and today we are going to look at this topic called an opportunity to heal with trauma. Now, this is going to be more informational than experiential. So, thank you for allowing me to share a lot of information with you, and hopefully, it will be helpful and guiding you in any of the ways in which you want to heal yourself over the next few months, the next year, or the next 2 decades with Pluto in Aquarius. Um, I'm going to start out with a mantra that I created for myself decades ago when I first started doing astrology, when I first started doing public speaking. It was just a mantra that I created to calm myself down. And over the years, it's been something that I have loved to share with people. So I'm going to put it on the screen, but I will speak it for you. If you want to, you can take a couple of deep breaths. You can even close your eyes, and you are welcome to use this for yourself however you want. So again, this is an invocation I created a long time ago. Spirit of God Goddess, come through me. Mind of God Goddess, speak through me. Heart of God Goddess, love through me. Body of God Goddess, I am. So if you want to take a look at the screen here, you can see, in addition to the word myself, me, we can also say this using the word you. So you can say it to someone else, and we can say it in groups and invoking the plural of us. And so happy to share this, and I hope it's something you may find useful for you into the future. I actually would say this before I would ever do a session with a client. It was just me trying to bring through spirit and move my little filter out of the way, as we astrologers will call it. So when we look at this subject that we call trauma, we know it to be an intense disturbance or event. And for those of us in the world of evolutionary astrology, trauma can be physical, it can be emotional, mental, or spiritual. Out of curiosity, I looked up the American Psychological Association and their definition of trauma. They limited it to emotions and emotional disturbance. And I'm sure if any of you just reflect on your own life, you can be traumatized in all four of these different ways. What gets included in this definition, though, is that it can have this event or disturbance, it can have a long-lasting effect, and we may or may not suppress it. And so let me just share this right off the bat. Last fall, I lost 3 close family members in 4 months. One of them was my 87-year-old father. He passed from a fall. And all 3 of the deaths, 2 brother-in-laws and my dad, all 3 of these were unexpected. 2 of the cases, one moment they were here and the next moment they were gone. So probably my most intense example of trauma right now in my world. And so you can think of all kinds of other examples for yourself. It doesn't have to be necessarily a death. It can be a car accident. It can be our lover breaking up with us. It can be anything that rocks our world from our perspective. And yes, we can have the things such as war and the effects of fighting in war. We can have, if you live in the United States, the mass killings that seem to take place week in, week out, and the confusion and wonder why we don't change any of that. So you probably are familiar with something that you can recognize in your life that you would call a traumatic event or disturbance for yourself. What tends to happen when we go through some of these traumatic events is that it can dictate our behavior. And it can do that in both subconscious and unconscious ways. My carefree husband has a tendency to say, honey, you're just overreacting to that. And then he calms down and recognizes, oh, yeah, she has Uranus square the nodes. Okay, just take a deep breath, honey. So we'll work with some other examples as we go by, but this is kind of how we look at it from the perspective of evolutionary astrology. And of course, in the last couple of decades, here in the United States, we finally accepted PTSD, what we would call post-traumatic stress disorder. In other words, this never-ending war in Afghanistan that we chose to initiate in this country, a lot of our our veterans come back and they have all the effects of the war and nothing was done about it. We're slowly starting to change those types of things. We're still woefully inadequate in addressing post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans, but hey, at least we've started to acknowledge it here in the last 5-10 years. Now, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, the planet that rules a sign in a house, all three are considered an interchangeable or the same archetype. So for us, trauma is, and yes, trauma can exist across all 12 archetypes, but we have primary rulership of trauma with the planet Uranus, and then that includes the sign Aquarius, wherever that is on your chart, and of course it includes the 11th house, whatever signs on there, any planets in Aquarius or the 11th, wherever Uranus is in your chart, will describe trauma aspects to Uranus. Basically, somewhere between 85 to 90% of souls are born with past life trauma, born with PTSD. And I like to turn that around and say, do you know anybody who isn't traumatized by something, current life, past lives? So these archetype of Uranus, and by extension Aquarius in 11th house, it represents in EA what we call the unconscious, the individuated unconscious mind within our own soul. And that individuated unconsciousness basically contains three parts to it. It contains the past in all its detail, as you see on your screen here, this life and past lives. It contains everything in the present that we want to avoid, ignore, or suppress and not deal with. And it contains the blueprints of the future, those glimpses into the future. Well, the trauma mainly exists in the past and the present. We haven't lived the future yet, huh? And so we can look at it being there just barely suppressed in our present moment, or being deep down in the psyche of the soul, the far memory or long-term memory from past lives as well. The quest is to be able to make sense of all this information, because in true Uranian fashion, we'll have tidbits pop up into consciousness from the unconscious, and they don't come with a date time stamp. They don't come with a storyline. We have to try and make sense what is what. We'll speak more to this about in as we go along here. But what I wanted to next point out to you, just in case you're not aware of this, is Jupiter is in Aquarius through the year 21. Saturn is in Aquarius 21, and we're going to have Pluto move into Aquarius for 2 decades. Pluto's going to spend 2 retrograde cycles moving into Aquarius, back to Capricorn, before it then moves into Aquarius for, again, 20 years. And so just these 3 planetary transits alone can traumatize us, re-traumatize us, and give us the opportunity to become conscious of the trauma and make the effort to heal it. And this is actually going to be the intent of the next 20-year cycle between Jupiter and Saturn. As you can see on your screen here, they had a conjunction December 21st of last year at 0.5 degrees Aquarius. And astrologers talked about the fact that the this conjunction at 0 Aquarius, it initiates these 20-year conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn in the element of air for the next 200 years. And so we won't take time with that, but we're shifting from these cycles being, these conjunctions being in earth, the material, to being air, which is now the mental and the mind. You can see how that will fit with this coming Aquarian age, which, by the way, nobody has a date for. So we can look at these planetary transits going forward as well. I just wanted to briefly offer those so you can see why we're talking about this issue of trauma right now. It happens to do with these planetary transits. One more thing. You know, Jupiter's expansion, Saturn's contraction, and they're a 20-year cycle that govern a lot of our societal and social political cycles together. Because these two planets are the boundaries of consciousness and they're moving through Aquarius, that alone has them wanting to pop into consciousness what is unknown and unique to each of us. It can also happen on a collective level, but recognize that. So if you have, you know, spontaneous recall, you know, I had it happen once in a shower, taking a shower one morning, and I had this spontaneous flashback from a past life. It was so intense, I ended up on the floor of the shower crying. I think the water may have been the trigger, who knows? But you get the point of what I'm saying here, in that these two planets really want to bring things into consciousness this year, next year, to help us in this healing process. And so it is important for all of us to not try to do that Saturnian suppression. They're going to set the stage for Pluto. So, boy, we better get in practice, right? or practice, get in shape. But I also wanted to touch upon Uranus and its rulership of the brain, and specifically how Uranus has rulership of the hypothalamus. And you can see, hopefully, here on your slide, I'm going to point it out right here. The hypothalamus, which is, wait a minute, right here, let's start with this one. Here's the hypothalamus, this little gland right in here. And this is, again, specific rulership to Uranus. And it secretes the hormones that have to do with most of our bodily functions, like our body temperature, our appetite and the urge to eat, sexuality, breathing. Uranus has rulership of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, that fight or flight. Uranus also has rulership of the female and male hormones. For instance, that surge of adrenaline when we have to take off running from the saber-toothed tiger. We don't have to do that anymore, but our brains don't know that, and the hypothalamus doesn't know that. And so when this modern world stresses us out, and something comes along and we watch a car accident take place right in front of us, we can have this hyperactive reaction that is related directly to this gland, starting all the chemical messages in the body and telling this part and that part to do this, do that, etc. In there with two other glands, and one of them is the pineal gland, which is the one that's right down here. This is the Neptune gland. This gland secretes melatonin. It is what helps us with the regulation of our sleep, but it also regulates what we would call transcendence in EA, that spiritual awakening that we could have. It's also related to the dream world, and it's related to drugs and addictions in those regards. And then the other one right here that we're looking at oops, I had that mixed up. This was the pituitary. This is the pineal that I was just talking about. This one here, the pituitary gland, is ruled by Jupiter and Saturn. It's the master gland that regulates growth and decay, Jupiter growth, Saturn decay. What I want you to look at is how all three of these talk back and forth to each other. These three glands have a lot to do with what we will call trauma in our world. When you see somebody who has experienced, the devastating effects of a war coming through their country and taking a parent and, ripping apart their home, it can have a real effect on their ability to just function. That pituitary gland doesn't really perform to the best of its abilities, and they can just be, shrunken, sore, traumatized soul. Pineal gland, they can succumb to wanting to partake in drugs to ease pain, or they can check out. Uranus has the rulership of any of the mental diseases that we would want to name, the schizophrenia, the multiple personality disorder, etc. Take your pick. But point is that when we have traumatic experiences in our lives, it affects the brain literally. It affects that ability for the synapses in the brain to naturally spark and think and move. And so I just wanted to give you this little background as well in this whole world of trauma. And of course, what we are looking at from the perspective of the westernized world, and I use this term very broadly, is we no longer are in harmony with what EA calls natural law. We don't pay any attention to the natural spiritual principles or cycles. We got to punch that time clock. We grab quick processed food because we only have 5 minutes to get from here to there. We don't get enough exercise. We sit at a desk all day. We don't get enough sleep. We live by an alarm clock. Because we ignore these natural human cycles, it really affects the hormonal balance, those glands that I was talking about before, but the whole entire endocrine system working and functioning correctly. And so with all of this stress that is human induced, that we put upon ourselves, how it creates this constant feeling of fight or flight, when we're like, hey, wait a minute, I live in a nice cushy house. I don't have any war in my country or near me. What am I so worried about? How come I'm so triggered? That unconscious trauma. But the stress of our westernized world, it has a tendency to create trauma and maintain that trauma as well. And so now I want to move forward and I want to talk about the whole concept of disease and trauma. And this is something that I think I was born knowing. I made the word SMEP up, okay? So that people who listen to me teach astrology a lot. Oh, Kim Marie's talking about spiritual, mental, emotional, physical when she says SMEP. And so I knew this way before I found astrology or nutrition or anything. And sometimes I'm surprised that the rest of the world doesn't know this as well. I think it's coming. I think it's part of that mind-body connection phrase that we hear all the time. But here's the point. Every manifestation of a physical imbalance, right now I'm popping into my head is Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life, where she talked about every physical disease and the mental cause and the mental affirmation to it. She was an early start of really bringing that out there to the public. But every manifestation of a physical balance has an emotional imbalance or crystallized feelings and emotions behind it. And if we're not dealing with that emotional imbalance, then it crystallizes into the disease. Well, behind every emotional imbalance is a mental imbalance, distorted thoughts. If I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. Get my point? Behind every mental imbalance is a spiritual imbalance. And every spiritual imbalance is a disconnect from universal source in some way. So now let me say this a different way for you. All illness starts with a spiritual disconnect, which leads to mental distortions, which lead to crystallized emotions, which condense into a physical manifestation we call a dis-ease. If you have liver disease, you have anger issues. There's all kinds of examples that you can go through, and I do recommend that old classic book, Louise Hay's, You Can Heal Your Life, where she goes through all of that. So when we look at trauma being such an intense disturbance in our life, can you see how it might cause us to feel abandoned by source? Can you see how that can affect us mentally, even to the extremes of the schizophrenia, hearing voices, or the depression that, nobody cares for me, nothing goes my way? Can you see how that then can manifest into these crystallized emotions and diseases? I point this out for you to show you how germane it is that we need to be able to heal trauma. I was talking to a client the other day, and I'd asked her if she'd ever heard of the cleansing of the swords, and she had never heard of it. So I'll paraphrase it the way that I know it. Long, long, long time ago, but as we were shifting from matriarchal principles to patriarchal principles, or patriarchal distortions, I should say, and as we started to fight each other more, go to war with each other more, there used to be an old ceremony, an old process in which all of the warriors, when they came back from the battlefields, they would visit the goddess, and they would go through healing ceremonies with the goddess. And yes, it included sexuality, but it wasn't distorted as we look at it today. And they would go through other rituals as well, and it would be directly towards helping them heal whatever they witnessed on the battlefield, whatever they experienced, whatever they did. The wasn't just cleaning the physical sword, it was cleaning the spirit and the mind and the heart and the body, so that they would not carry those effects with them. Well, we lost the ability to do that, and it's what we need to do again on a modern way in modern worlds. And it's my hope that that's what we'll see happen, especially during the 2 decades that Pluto's in Aquarius. And whatever you can do to be a part of creating this on planet Earth, please, please do so. I used to be afraid of the dark until I learned that I am the light, and the darkness is afraid of me. So in knowing what I just showed you, let's turn it around, all right? When we look to healing and SMEP, any miraculous self-healing always starts with a spiritual reconnection to universal source. And it can be nothing more than you and source. It can be nothing more than conversation in your own head. I like to say the relationship we have with source is identical to the relationship we have with ourself. And the relationship we have with ourself is vice versa. You get the point. And so it's one and the same. We co-create with source in the natural world. And our relationship to source is 24/7. No computer, no book, no building, no, intermediary. It can be just you and source and calling out and asking source. I got another mantra for that one here. The next slide coming up. The point is, in healthy perspective of letting go and letting God goddess, it's not I'm a victim and I'm at the whims of fate. It's recognizing that we are co-creators in the universe. And every time we make a baby step forward in self-improvement, source itself evolves. So that ability to accept and participate with universal source in a co-creative process, it really is self-empowering. It allows us to recognize we do have everything within to heal ourselves. And when we make that connection and that recognition, then that allows us to have some shifts in the mental perspective. This is then where affirmations can be of use to us. This is where we can go to the talk therapies. This is where we can have communications one-on-one with our besties to really move through something, not from a sense of victimization, but from here's what I've learned from this experience, and here's how I want to move forward from this experience, rather than allowing it to continually trap me. So we can really work with a self effort mentally, creating a positive mental outlook for us. That then is going to condense down into emotions of a more positive nature. Emotions where we self accept. I'm doing the best I can do every day. Where we self love unconditionally, warts, sparks, and all, as I like to say. And that means that emotionally, we have an ability to trust in the universe, to trust we're okay. And then all that condenses down into physically releasing whatever is contained by the dis-ease. And it allows the body to reestablish health within itself. I had an interesting conversation. My husband and I are down to our two mothers. We're very grateful. And on Leroy's side of the family, there's always what we call Friday night happy hours. Not so much anymore. We finally said, Mom, we got a life. We want to go for a hike. We want to go to the movies. But we do manage to do our Friday night happy hours every so often with our mother. Leroy and I were there a few weeks ago, and his sister was there and his sister's niece. And there was a lot going on. Oh, there was something that happened locally. In our small little community, somebody broke into someone's house. They knew him and they murdered him. It created a big conversation. And the point that I was going to make is Leroy looks around the table and he says, well, do you believe that the world is a safe place or not? Do you trust in the universe? Nope, 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 nope. Around the table, everybody said no. And Leroy and I looked at each other and I went, okay, we'll let that conversation go. I don't think we'll follow through on that one because we could talk till we're blue in the face. And I don't think our elderly mother of the true faith will be interested in anything we have to say. Point is, as I showed you how we can move from the world of energy to the world of manifestation and working to heal ourselves, not just of trauma, but anything that we would consider to be a disease in our world. That emotional ability to trust the universe, which is trust source, that is so important. That's like the key between the unmanifested and the manifested. It was Jeffrey Green's old quote, evolution takes place through the emotional body. We've got to, bring it through the senses. And so we create it that way with disease. We heal that way with our own healings as well. So here is two of my favorite mantras. They're both question marks, and I say these all the time. And if you want to look at healing and SMEP, Neptune in Pisces, what would you have me know, Source? What would you have me do, Source? And I say, if you ask them as a question, you invite direct answer. And it can show up in all kinds of ways. And sometimes we've got to ask the question again and again and again until that own answer, our own answer, pops up into consciousness all on its own. So if you are recognizing that you have trauma, again, find somebody who doesn't. I have a little joke, another little joke for you. Prepping for this class today, moving along, I got a little frustrated. I'm traumatizing myself, Leroy, just prepping for this class. I need to go outside and take a walk. So I did that. I'm about an hour from class. I feel like I've got my slides together pretty good. Just a little final read, fine tuning. I look at my computer and I look at the battery thing down on the corner of my computer, and my mouse just happened to hover over it and it says plugged in, not charging. I freaked out. I went, oh, you know what? And I close down my computer, I do an update, I reboot, I do everything, I move it, I plug it in somewhere else. I literally type out to Linda, I think I'm going to lose my computer. I finally had to take my own medicine. I finally had to go sit with myself, have my conversation with Source, and go, okay, this is just me freaking out, trying to self-sabotage. And so the computer says 29%, and it says it's been saying 29% for an hour and a half now. So point is, we can be going along with life just fine, and all of a sudden, boom, we're right back into being 5 years old when, one of our parents were cruel to us. We have to make persistent effort, especially in this westernized world, to change the effects of trauma. I had to sit down with myself. I had to take a couple of deep breaths. I had to just go, well, that was real interesting, Kim Marie. Feeling a little triggered, are we? Okay, how can we breathe? Do we need to go for another walk? I didn't need to do a walk. I finally just calmed myself down and put a kitty on my lap and sat with my little baby kitty. Well, he's not a baby, he's 3, for a while, and purred and kneaded, and I felt okay again. Point is, we must always make a consistent effort to work through the triggers, to work through the trauma and the effects of the trauma. As you can see on your screen here, all I'm going to do is list them, and it's not a complete list. It's just to spark ideas for you. Point is, when I say, what would you have me do, Source? You can just ask the universe that when you are wanting to reach out and heal in any way. Now, if it is depths of trauma, sometimes we need individual and group talk therapy. One of our deaths was my youngest sister's husband at 47, complication, a stroke. And one moment he was here, the next moment he was gone. Bless my sister, she put her, my 11-year-old niece, in therapy. And they go on their own and they go together um, as a parent child, and they go together as a group with others who have experienced the loss of their partner. So I, by no means, no, yeah, get my language right. Whatever works for each of us is what is best for each of us. Whether it is traditional or alternative, it doesn't matter. We woefully neglect mental health care in this country. I live in a state that is 10% Native American. I live in a city that is 25% Native American. And I have to give credit to our city fathers and mothers because they have been really bringing up the issue over the last probably 3 to 5 years that we don't have a mental health center in our part of the state. And they went to bat and they got our state government to fund creating a mental health center. And it's going to be connected to something that in our community is called One Heart Center. And that means all of our social service facilities, be they local, state, federal, be they medical, be they healthcare, be they drug addiction, whatever, we took the campus of a small little college and turned it into one place. It just opened about a month ago. They've turned it into one place that people go to, and whatever the resource is that they need, they find it in that one area. The dorms of this small little college were reconfigured to allow singles and to allow mothers and children. And at some point, they will open up space where they can have both parents and children so that they can have a place to live while they're going through various therapies. We so woefully neglect this, and I have hope. Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius, and Pluto and Aquarius following, that we are going to recognize that we must support all of our social systems. Joe Biden has in the United States has come out and talked about how, mental health care is infrastructure. Daycare for children before they go to school, which is up to each state in the United States, is so foundational to providing the healing to raising healthy children. And of course, adequate food, clothing, and shelter. Those are things in the traditional ways that really help heal trauma. It may not be healing it from perhaps an alternative perspective that I may have with past life regression therapy, deep memory processing, which I absolutely love, the work of Roger Wolger that Patricia Walsh carries on. That was the therapy I turned to with Uranus square the nodes opposite Chiron, which is also square the nodes, which is also being triggered by by the Saturn Uranus squares this year. And I'm going, oh gosh, I might have to go back and do some more DMP work. But I have an old Jeffrey Wolf Green unconsciousness reprogramming exercise for you that I will show you here at the ends of these slides. Point as you are recognizing probably, whether it's traditional or alternative, whatever works for you. And in that alternative world, there are so many um, various ways we can heal. I remember long time ago when Jeffrey Green and Noel Till did their conferences in Denver. I remember a group of us sitting around one evening just doing Q&A with Jeffrey, and we got into a conversation about how important the four-leggeds are, animal therapy, in healing us when human relationships or relationships with the two-leggeds are so broken, and how animals love unconditionally. You know, I'd put a cat in every room of nursing homes if I was in charge, except for those that are allergic. Then we'd have a puppy dog. Immersing yourself in nature. That is my probably number one thing that I do when I am triggered, no matter how much I bungle up in the northern plains in the winter. Shamanic ceremonies, with or without the plant medicines, breath work, and of course, any way that you can perceive emotional, mental processing. There's probably lots of ideas that I am not mentioning here. Again, whatever works for you. So I want to just touch for a moment here on Jupiter and Aquarius. Many of us will recognize that Jupiter is our intuition. It is our right brain. It's how we tap into those larger forces of the universe and bring information down into our own consciousness. And so Jupiter in Aquarius for this year, 21, it's going to offer us the intuition to understand where we are most traumatized, and therefore the areas of our life that are most in need of healing. And you can look and see where Jupiter in Aquarius is in your chart by house. That could easily be one of the, or those archetypes could be the areas that are really triggering you front and center. Or maybe Jupiter in Aquarius is making aspects, oppositions to the Pluto Leos, going to the depth of your soul in regards to ideas for healing. Maybe it's making squares to Taurus and Scorpio, and you're having triggers from old sexual wounding or abandonment by partners, whatever. I want you to just recognize, okay, that Jupiter in Aquarius is not just going to be, oh, I got triggered and I'm just frozen. Jupiter in Aquarius is the timing to participate in whatever therapies we perceive to be most helpful in helping us uncover and become conscious of those deep wounds and traumas. So utilize that energy with Jupiter. What would you have me know, Source? Where would you have me heal? How? And invite Jupiter just to intuitively give that information to you. Saturn in Aquarius, 2 more years yet. I think it's early spring, March 23, before it goes into Pisces. Saturn in Aquarius for 2 years offers this ability to detach from the immediacy of our reality and objectify what needs to change in our life. So Saturn in Aquarius can also, though, give us that opportunity to detach from trauma and look at it. Oh, where's this coming from? Why is this affecting me so much? What can I do in changing up my routine to heal that? If the first thing you do every day is get up and check your news feeds, whether it's the political stuff going on in the world or the social media applications, and all of a sudden something triggers you. Perhaps Saturn in Aquarius will offer you an opportunity to not look at your phone right away. I've been practicing with that one. I will admit, I have my phone silenced, but I will look at it to see if my mom's trying to reach me, because I'm always on call for my mother. With she's still processing. But otherwise, I try to see how long I can go before I've actually opened up my phone to check something. Just a small example. It may be getting up off the couch or off your chair once an hour and just taking 5 minutes of walk to clear your head, to refresh yourself, to, create a new outlook. So Saturn in Aquarius, we think of Aquarius being fixed air, being, stubborn or sustaining certain attitudes. And yes, you see how that repetitious cycle goes with trauma. But Saturn is, Saturn is a cardinal archetype or cardinal modality. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So don't think that you can't use Saturn in Aquarius to create new routines that are more natural for you, that are more healing for you. Instead of checking out that phone first thing in the morning, getting up and walking outside for 5 minutes, or getting up and doing a small meditation routine, or an exercise, whatever. But Saturn in Aquarius can be very, very helpful for us in changing routines, especially when we look at that blueprint of the future with the unconscious mind and how where our own soul intends to go, we get that future orientated message that comes again, all on its own. That's where you take that Saturn in Aquarius willpower and you actually move forward in that direction. You make that effort to evolve, to grow. And of course, as Jupiter in Aquarius gives you the intuitive hits on what modalities you want to practice in healing your trauma, Saturn in Aquarius is applying the effort. It's making the effort. It's applying the will. It's actually being responsible and following through and doing it. Now, we probably are quite aware that we have Saturn making 3 last quarter squares to Uranus. Saturn is the individuated consciousness. Uranus is the individuated unconsciousness. Here are the 3 dates. We've already had the first one. I'll tend to tell people, just think of these 2 planets being within this orb of energy for the whole year. Even into the beginning of 22 for the first 3, 4, 5 months as they make that last quarter square in December. Last quarter squares, crises in consciousness or beliefs. And so all around us, and probably any continent, most, if not all countries of the world, we're all becoming aware of how our infrastructures and social support systems are not working anymore. They're breaking down. They're not supporting us, or we haven't even built them up yet in the first place. But all of us can be feeling triggered security-wise because Saturn is the physical. And Uranus in Taurus, I like my security. I like to know that I have got this, I have got that. Oh, Another thing that happened in my world as Saturn and Uranus are on this. 2 weeks ago, we had a forest fire come within a half mile of our house. 3 days, Leroy and I had everything of value packed in our 2 vehicles. We didn't get evacuated. I actually live on a cliff in the mountains, in the foothills of the mountains, and the other side of well, there's multiple mountains. The other side of the canyon ranges from a half mile away to probably a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles away. Well, down below there was a 5-lane highway, and they managed to not let the flames cross the highway. But the first night, Leroy and I looked out our bedroom window and literally watched flames across that valley away from us. So, yeah, wow. I'm still like, you know, I really got clear on what was important. My jewelry, my computer, and my cats. Clothes. Oh, I did put 1 box of photos. So, last quarter squares, we're all going to be triggered somehow, some way, and where we're not feeling supported. And the purpose of these crises then are to, last quarter, break down whatever is no longer working, what doesn't work for each of us individually, what doesn't work for each of us collectively. And it also, with Uranus in Taurus, I've said, Uranus in Taurus is from time to time going to pull that rug of outer security out from underneath us, that food, clothing, shelter, that material comfort that we all have. It's going to pull it out from underneath us. And what that does is it asks us to go inward to create deeper inner security. And that's what these Saturn-Uranus squares are asking us to do. So how can we support ourselves inwardly till we feel secure in the outer world again? My next slide is going to speak to the point that I'm going to make next. But before I move on, one more time, these Saturn-Uranus squares can be very trauma-inducing. It is very important how any moment of intensity, any moment of trauma, it is always a choice point. It is so important how we choose to handle it in the moment. And so we can either re-traumatize ourselves, or we can breathe, think, feel, intuitively move our way forward. The forest fire for Leroy and I, it was a very good opportunity for us to just look at what was really important in our world. I am blessed to live in a nice place. I have 1.5 acres in the mountains, but I would walk away from it before I'd walk away from my 2 kitty cats or my sweet husband. And so when we go through those intensities, that Uranian energy, make those synapses work. Think, 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 think. You know how they talk about that accident seems to go past you in slow motion? Okay, that's the intensity of the mind starting to work. And what we want to do is, you know, I'm like, okay, source, be here now. And I'm like, blah, 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 whatever I'm, you know, needing to go through, and I just visualize that energy coming down into me and thinking and feeling and prioritizing. And okay, how do I move forward? How do I heal? How do I minimize the karma? You know, my mind just starts to go, I guess, in that direction, and work with it. And so we don't have to settle into victimization that we've been so conditioned with via the distortions of patriarchy. We don't have to settle for being a victim, even in the midst of a traumatic experience. You know, Leroy and I came on the other side of that forest fire and we walked around outside when it was over. We walked around and we just blessed the trees. We blessed the plants. We blessed everything. We said prayers for any of the four-leggeds that lost their life around us. And we, again, we chose to feel grateful that we didn't lose our home. We chose to feel grateful for whatever whatever it is that we have in our world. We always have the opportunity to do that, even in the midst of trauma. Now, coming off of that, this is an old Louise Hay quote that I have said for almost 40 years. I expanded it a little bit, but I really invite you to learn this one. Everything I need to know is revealed to me. And everything I need and desire comes to me in my highest and best time-space sequence. I do not know how many gazillion times I have said this, but this is one that I really use a lot. If something's troubling me, I can't ponder something out, you know, especially, I for whatever reasons, when something is worrying me, when something is freaking me out, this is my mantra that allows me to calm myself down. Thank you very much, Louise. I wanted to make a couple of comments about Chiron and Uranus. They have a very erratic and long cycle together. The intent between them as a planetary pair is to self-heal any unconscious wounding and trauma. The wounding word from Chiron, the trauma word from Uranus. Well, it's hard to heal trauma when it's not conscious. And that is somewhat of what Chiron's role is. I want to say, I think it was Barbara Han Clow that called Chiron the rainbow bridge, the bridge between Saturn and Uranus, consciousness, unconsciousness. And so I thought it quite interesting that their last conjunction was back in 1898 at 4 degrees Sag. And, you know, that seed thought of any conjunction once, 3 times, 7 times. Sagittarius, to me, with Chiron and Uranus, is the intent to rediscover and return to those natural spiritual laws and principles. Natural law, EA says, or shamanism. Well, chances are many of us, I already mentioned I have a pretty tight Chiron-Uranus opposition, and they're in a tight square to the nodes in the fixed modalities. Many of us are probably, you know, sitting around between 1952 and 1989, and we carry a Chiron-Uranus opposition in our chart. They made 41 oppositions to each other during that time period. Almost 40 years they were in opposition to each other. I always looked at that, the Chiron-Uranus oppositions. I looked at that as, you know, just generations of souls coming onto the planet and going, I want to get a handle on my trauma. I want to learn some objectivity, opposition on why I'm this way and how I can heal it. And whether we have a belief in reincarnation or not, there can be souls on the planet that are still wanting, I want to be able to heal, understand my familial karma and break free from it and heal myself. That, again, I see all those oppositions as that ability to see and objectify and then throw off that past and liberate ourselves into freedom and into the future. Well, how many of you are aware that between 2009 and 2038, Chiron is making 31 waning semi-sextiles to Uranus? That's the 330 degree on the 360 degree circle. So that balsamic phase, that last 30 minutes before they meet as a conjunction together. And to me, this, symbolizes, especially for any of us, it's true for all of us, but perhaps maybe especially for those of us who may have Chiron Uranus oppositions. This is our chance, waning semi-sextile, to surrender to source and co-create and heal, to surrender all of the pain and the suffering and ask source to show us how we may heal ourselves. Well, get this little tidbit, okay? Gotta have a little humor, huh? Talking about trauma. Look at these dates on your screen in red. Chiron makes the 25th waning semi-sextile to Uranus. It did it March 31st, 9 degrees, Aries Taurus. It will make the 26th one in just a few weeks, May 3rd, 11 degrees, Aries Taurus. And then it won't make the last 5 waning semi-sextiles until 2036, 37, 38. They won't conjunct again, 1898 to 2042. That's how long this Chiron Uranus cycle is. So when you start to ponder some of this stuff with the Chiron Uranus interaction, it's just like, wow. Here's the universe supporting us with opportunities to heal, not only for ourselves individually, but, with climate change and Uranus and Taurus, this species extinction, we've got to do everything we can to heal all species, including planet Earth or Gaia. And we don't have, I'm in the astrologer camp. Who knows the exact date? We're just transitioning from Piscean to Aquarian age. It's all getting shook up. So what can we do about it? How can we break these patriarchal change of distortion and leap forward into this Aquarian age of unity and diversity? Well, stay tuned. But I just offer these Chiron Uranus tidbits for you to perhaps help you in jump starting some of your own healing this year, next year, the rest of your life. As long as we breathe air, we will continue to heal. And then we just leave the body behind and we go learn the lessons on the other side in another way. When are we not healing? So the ability to embrace opportunities to heal, I think, is so important for us right now. Now, I'm down to my final few slides, and I'm down to Jeffrey Green's unconsciousness reprogramming exercise. I don't know if everybody's on this by Facebook. I don't know if there's an ability with Q&A or any of that, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody would have any. And while I see if there is, as I go forward, I just want to point this out, and I find this to be true for myself, in addition to this being some of the original EA teachings from Jeffrey Green. While we may consciously think and verbalize affirmations until we're blue in the face, the young consciousness still has its effect via beliefs, thoughts, and emotions. It is in the reprogramming of the unconsciousness that our soul breaks free of old programming. I'm a fan of past life regression, specifically deep memory processing. I love its healing work physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually with unconscious trauma. However, some of us may not have the luxury to know a practitioner in our neighborhood. Some of us may not have the budgets. There may be a variety of reasons why we may not necessarily be able to participate in various therapies. I found this in the early days of my studies of EA with Jeffrey. And so I kind of expanded upon it. And instead of reading it, I am going to there's 2 slides that I'm going to leave on the screen here for a little while. And anybody's welcome to contact me if you can't get this quite right or access it, and I can definitely give you a PDF of it. But this is an exercise that Jeffrey Green created to reprogram the unconsciousness. And it's taking all of our old negative programming and experiences and making a list of them. And then it's writing the corresponding affirmation. And of course, I'm in there going, you must use first person tense, I am, and you must use present tense, not into the future. And you basically make a recording of these positive affirmations in your own voice. And you can leave a certain amount of silence at the beginning that would allow you to fall asleep. And what the goal is and you only listen to it with the right ear and right to receive, okay? And the goal is to listen to it each and every night. And Jeffrey was pretty strict that if you missed a night, your count started over from the beginning. And I've known people who have created their own, unconsciousness reprogramming tapes and have listened to them for years. The point would be to listen to it until you start to see changes in your life, which would typically be about 4 to 6 months. And another thing I'll point out that's on this screen as well, if you are a parent of young children, you can whisper positive affirmations in their right ear when they are asleep. Especially some of us, you draw in the client and they want the chart read on their young child, and the child has come in with trauma and they just aren't having any luck with various therapies other than to drug them down with, I don't know, Ritalin or whatever this stuff is, the various drugs. This is definitely something that I share with those kinds of parents and tell them, I give them this exercise and say, you can practice this with the child and see if you can get down deep and really help some of the traumatized aspects of their soul be able to heal. And so for me, these 2 slides here with this exercise, one of the most valuable things you could do for yourself if you are really wanting to heal any trauma or wounding of any kind that appears to be popping up into consciousness with Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, and Saturn making this last quarter squares to Uranus itself. I think with these transits, again, we're all being traumatized. We're all having the unconscious traumas. busting up into the surface. We all have great opportunities to heal right now. So be at peace with your own soul. Then heaven and earth will be at peace with you. I think I'm getting done just a little bit faster. I'm going to close with my last slide. I'm just going to pause for a moment. If Linda or Sue, if there's any questions, and if not, you're okay to just remain silent. I just always like to make that offer.
I have a comment. I love this. This is awesome. It's so well presented, Kimberly. It's awesome. I'm just in awe of the way the planets set this up with Jupiter first going through Aquarius, then Saturn, and then eventually Pluto, and then with your adding the Chiron Uranus part, after that, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. You're most welcome. And yeah, divine intelligence, really is all I can point it to.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible.
Thank you, Sue.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm just going to end with the invocation that we started with. For those of you, as you are listening, if you want to close your eyes, if you want to take a deep breath, you sure can. I'm going to repeat it 3 times, okay? Spirit of God, Goddess, come through me. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through me. Heart of God, Goddess, love through me. Body of God, Goddess, I am. Spirit of God, Goddess, come through you. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through you. Heart of God, Goddess, love through you. Body of God, Goddess, you are. Spirit of God, Goddess, come through us. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through us. Heart of God, Goddess, love through us. Body of God, Goddess, we are. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, EA Zoom.